Well, it's Sunday.
It's not.
It's Tuesday.
It is.
Sorry, it's Tuesday. It's one of those days that ends in Y. So as we look at the division in our nation and racism and all that good stuff, there's someone that we haven't talked about in a while, Martin Luther King. So Randy had the bright idea that I should talk about King for a second. For those of you who are not old enough to remember this, Martin Luther King on 1963 on August 28th, a few years ago, has a speech. You can go listen to Martin Luther King tell his speech. But there's a bunch of people who apparently like to listen to me jabber. Here are King's words, very famously, before he was shot, obviously. I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon of light, of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to crash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, we were singing a promissory note. We were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. Oh, we refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom, the security of justice. We've also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment, this sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of the freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning, yes. And those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content with will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwind of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something that I must say to my people who stand in the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice in the process of gaining our rightful place. We must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence again and again. We must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. A marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. Many of our white brothers, as evidenced by the presidents here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We can't turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. Yes, we can never be sustained or satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and of the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes she has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied. We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. I'm not unmindful that some of you will come here out of the rituals and tribulations. Some of you will come from fresh, narrow jail cells. Some of you will come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lip dripping with the words interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and the flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is our faith that I go back to the South with this faith. We will be able to hew out the mountain of despair and a stone of hope. Oh, with this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain, Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain, Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. Yes, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we'll let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men, white men, Protestants, Jews, Gentiles, Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty. We are free at last. I only missed King's number by a minute. That was it was a 10-minute written speech. Remember that? So let's look at what we're dealing with here. This is a cry of racism, which we still hear today, and it's all propagated by the mainstream media.
That's
13% of our population is Negro. 13%, 0.0 whatever percent or 0.1%. I think maybe up to 4% now is the LGBT community. But what do we see all over the media? 0% of us care about Ukraine, but yet that's all over the media. We're being programmed. We talk here about unalienable rights of liberty, pursuit of happiness. That this is everybody. This is not black. This is not white. They're talking about voter discrimination. The right is being discriminated against right now. Kerry Lake trial, the Hobbs trial, Dr. Hobbs and who's our guy that was the attorney general that we covered. That we're still dealing with voter suppression. We're still dealing with discrimination, but now it's medical discrimination. It's not a whites only sign for this restaurant. It's a vaccinated only sign for this restaurant. They change the names and they keep the process and they keep us locked up and locked down and closed in and shut up. I say, no, I have a dream. I have a dream that we come together out of medical tyranny. I have a dream that we come together out of financial tyranny. I have a dream that we come together as a nation and go back to a republic. We get rid of fiat currency and kill the Fed. I have a dream that we are all taken not from this label of Negro, but this label of useless eater, because that's what they call us, useless eaters. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out its true meaning, its creed, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, despite medical status, despite vaccination status, despite color, despite religion, that we may all stand up. That one day, minus the slave owners, we will be able to stand up because we are currently still enslaved.
That is so true.
That is my rail. Got any closing remark on that?
One day.
T-minus 14 days from MLK's birthday. Think
That's
people realize
right.
that tyranny is not color?
That is so true.
Okay. Say goodnight, Gracie. We're coming right back.
Good night.